Welcome back to the Auto Obsessive Garage. Chadwick with you again for another installment of Project Show Me the Sleeper. Now, where we left off last time, not a good spot. Coming back from RADwood, the car sputtered, was unable to keep running. Also, any attempts to start the car were just not working. It would not start at all. So my first thought, gotta be fuel pump, right? Seems just like the symptoms of a fuel pump that's quit out. So get the car home. As soon as it comes down in temperature, probably like 4 to 5 hours later, I'm able to start the car just fine. Runs. I'm a little concerned, right? So the fuel pump's not totally dead, but intermittent fuel pump failure, issues with that kind of stuff can happen, and it's a real pain in the butt to sort out. My thought was, well, if it really is the fuel pump, then maybe it is just being overworked. I was in stop and go traffic. You know, the fuel pump works a little harder, obviously, especially that, and we're going up a pretty large hill at the time. Maybe that fuel pump's pretty old. Who knows if it's the original? 30 years is a long time for a fuel pump to last. Now this car only has 130,000 miles on it, so that's not unheard of, but 30 years is a lot of time. Let's go ahead today and diagnose a fuel pump. So obviously if the fuel pump's gone and you're not getting fuel pressure to your car and it's not starting at all, then that's easy, fuel pump. But if it starts after it's stalled on you, then that's an intermittent issue. So let's go ahead and test and see if we can find out if that's actually the cause of our problems or not. It's all about the fuel system and fuel issues today, guys. All right, time to break out our fuel pressure testing kit. Make sure our fuel pressure is good on the show. Lucky for us, what's really easy is the gauge setup is pretty simple because we're dealing with a Schrader valve. We have a Schrader valve under the hood. So really simple connector there. Just need a basic Schrader valve connector like this. Hook that up and we'll be good to go. So let's go ahead and see how that fuel pump's doing. See how our fuel pressure looks. So following up the unfortunate event of breaking down on the highway coming back from RADwood, we really need to do some diagnostic work here. So first thing we're going to do is go ahead and test the fuel pressure. Make sure we're getting the number we should be for the vehicle. I've gone ahead and hooked up my fuel pressure testing system. We're going to go ahead and start the car. The car does start, so it's more of an intermittent problem, which is interesting. So it's not a totally dead fuel pump. I've seen fuel pumps that are really worn that overheat, like in stop and go traffic, and that might be the issue here. But I'm curious. I want to see what kind of fuel pressure we're seeing, and then we'll go from there and test other sensors and components. But this is a good first test as it sputtered, so I just want to rule out the fuel pump. Which, by the way, for anyone interested in owning or currently owning this year range of Taurus SHO, it is an in-tank fuel pump and there is no access, so you have to drop the tank. So keep that in mind also. That's super fun. So let's go ahead and crank the car and see what our fuel pressure looks like. Triple check all your connectors, make sure we're nice and tight here. Clearly we're running a little bit low. It's actually dropped a little bit since it's warming up. It's kind of a bad sign. I don't think our pump is at full health. This seems to be a very low fuel pressure. So far the culprit does seem to be the fuel pump. What we're looking at here is the back seat of the Taurus SHO. As you can see, unfortunately, this car has no fuel pump access panel, which is a shame. Now, also, where I got to this part, you just simply remove the rear seat, You roll up the carpet here and take out the sound deadening and roll it back here so you can have access. Now, there also is another layer of what appears to be like a dynomat substance. So some vehicles have these. I don't think the base Tauruses do, but the SHOs do, at least this one, and it's color matched, which is interesting. Anyway, what I've gone up is drawn a template up here, which you can see the marker. That is where the fuel sending unit should be. So I don't want to drop the tank, partially because I have 15 gallons of fuel in here and it's going to take a while to siphon, and not to mention trying to drop a 30-year-old tank. Who knows what kind of issues you could run into. So I'm going to cut this access panel. Also, the thought of putting in an aftermarket pump, having it not work, and then having to do the job twice, not my style. So we're going to cut a nice clean access panel, swap the pump out that way, and then we'll have easy access to it in the future. Here we are zoomed in. That is the template. That is the area I'm looking to cut. So I'm going to do the safest way possible because you don't have a lot of clearance. Like honestly, right below here are the fuel lines and everything else. You don't want to cut any of those wires or any of those fuel lines, obviously. So I'm going to use tin snips. I'm going to get the dynomat off, and then I'm going to make some peeky holes where I can kind of cut around with the tin snaps, peek around, make sure I'm in the right area before I make the rest of the cuts. And then I'm going to try to make a nice flap that I can secure back down when I'm done with the project. Here we go. As always, safety first. Let's go ahead and disconnect the negative battery terminal. The first step was cutting through this kind of dynomat material here in the trunk. So I used a little razor blade knife, cut the general area. Probably gonna have to cut more depending on how accurate this is. Then used the screwdriver and kind of just pried it up. I was able to remove it all in one piece. So that's easy. Now it's the tough part. We're gonna have to actually break through this metal. I've looked at some photos to see where all the fuel lines and electrical connectors are. So I think I'm gonna look again and look to see where the best place to pierce is. I'm gonna try to pierce with a screwdriver and hammer, just kind of get a little hole and then use my tin snips and open it up a little bit and peek around to see if I have to make any adjustments. All right, let's keep going. Alright, we're underneath the Ford Taurus SHO. We've got our head basically poked under just in front of the rear passenger wheel, and this is the angle you'll see when you're looking up at the fuel filter. So pretty simple design here. It's an inline filter, line coming from the fuel tank, going through the filter, coming out here. Your standard period Ford clips here. You can use a screwdriver, sometimes you get them with your fingers. Be careful, you know the rule, aged plastic on a 30-year-old car. This is a Motorcraft filter, so I'm gonna go ahead and say it's maybe the factory one. Not sure if someone replaced it, so I've got an aftermarket Wix filter. We'll compare sizes just to be 100% before we install it, but know this, you are gonna get a little bit of fuel and sometimes a lot of fuel, so go ahead and have a drip pan handy to catch any of that. And let's go ahead, first thing first, wanna loosen up this clamp holding on the fuel filter so we are able to actually move the filter around, and then we'll pop these clips off and try to be as quick as we can getting that new fuel filter on there. Sometimes you can crimp the lines. I'm not a big fan of crimping really old rubber lines. Sometimes you can crack them doing that, so we're just gonna go ahead and try to be as quick as possible. Make sure you have no pressure in your fuel system, which I know because we just did a bunch of fuel pressure tests and the system is at 0, so we shouldn't have extra pressure, shouldn't have fuel squirting out, but you know, always expect the worst. Safety goggles, gloves, something to catch the gasoline that's gonna be coming out. All right, let's start by loosening the hose clamp, and then we'll get these guys. What I've done here to make things a little easier for myself, not a bad strategy, I took that whole clamp off, and then I used a pretty good amount of strength to bend this bracket. Now I can move the fuel filter up and down easier, and what that's gonna do is help you when you disconnect this one and the fuel's coming out, and you can slide the next one up more easily. Then it'll be just easy enough to bend this back in place. But just give yourself that little bit of efficiency when you're replacing them. That way you get to wear a little less gasoline, which is always a nice thing. So just a little tip there. And of course you wanna hold your new replacement filter up to the old one. Just make sure they're about the same size, make sure your flow is going in the right direction, and this will save you leaking even more gasoline as you try to get the connectors back on. So just make sure it's a good fit. New fuel filter installed, everything looks great, no leaks. Not a bad idea to run the car and check to see if there's any leaks under pressure, but everything went pretty smoothly, so this Wix filter was a direct replacement. I'll put the part number and box description in the film right now. But yeah, it's a pretty straightforward job, guys. Safety first, goggles, catch can for the gas coming out, and after you're done, go ahead and tighten this strap here, bend your bracket back into place, and you're good to go. New fuel filter. Well, there we go. So we replaced the entire fuel sending unit, and we replaced the fuel filter, so the fuel system is good to go. Clearly, when I replaced the fuel sending unit, we could see a difference in the fuel pressure levels. That's a pretty clear indicator our old pump wasn't up to the task. Once we saw those numbers, they looked a lot more healthier. So very happy with that. Also the fact that it was an original fuel sending unit. You know, 30 plus years is a long time for a unit like that to last. So that definitely was on short notice anyway, and definitely was the cause of why the car broke down. So good to get that out of there. Always a good idea to do the filter too, which looked original. So hey, I'm feeling pretty good about the fuel system in this car, guys, and that's one last thing we had to get rid of. You know, any kind of drivability issue like that, I didn't want to do time about water pump and then still have that kind of issue in the car. So resolve that issue, and that means we just forecasted what's coming next. So we're going to be digging into this beautiful Yamaha engine. We're going to be doing the time about water pump, all the gaskets we can get to, including valve cover gaskets both sides. We're going to go ahead and do the intake manifold gaskets. We're also going to do the valve shims, make sure those are all good to go. You're supposed to do those every 60,000 miles with these cars, and any other kind of items we can get to when we're in there. So anything that we can replace, any kind of O-rings, gaskets, anything like that, we're going to do while we're in there. So here comes the fun part, guys. Let's tear into this engine, have some fun. It's going to be a blast. So that's what we're doing next time. Thanks again for following, guys, and we'll catch you next time in the Auto Obsessive Garage. Take care.